There is a dam in China so large that scientists have calculated it actually slowed the rotation of the Earth, not by much. Not by anything a human being could feel, but by a measurable, real, physical amount, because the dam holds back so much water at such elevation that it redistributed enough mass to alter the planet's moment of inertia. Let that settle for a moment that a single piece of human infrastructure, built in one country, on one river, affected the rotation of the entire planet. The Three Gorges Dam on the Yangtze River in central China is the largest hydroelectric power station ever built in human history. It generates more electricity than any other single structure on Earth. Its reservoir stretches 600 kilometers upstream, longer than the distance from Washington, D.C. to Boston. To build it, China relocated 1.4 million people, submerged 13 cities, 140 towns, and over 1,300 villages, flooded more than 1,000 years of history and culture beneath 175 meters of water. It was the most controversial infrastructure project of the 20th century. It was opposed by engineers, environmentalists, historians, and millions of Chinese citizens. China built it anyway. And what it built, and what it destroyed, is one of the most consequential stories of the modern world. To understand why China built the Three Gorges Dam, you first have to understand the Yangtze River. The Yangtze is the longest river in Asia and the third longest in the world, stretching 6,300 kilometers from the glaciers of the Tibetan Plateau to the East China Sea near Shanghai. It drains a watershed of nearly 1.8 million square kilometers, an area larger than all of Western Europe. For 5,000 years, Chinese civilization has been built along its banks. The Yangtze feeds rice paddies that feed hundreds of millions of people. It connects the interior of China to the coast. It carries more cargo than any river in the world, and throughout that entire history, it has flooded, not occasionally, not unpredictably, catastrophically, repeatedly, generation after generation. In 1931, the Yangtze flooded in what is still considered one of the deadliest natural disasters in human history. The flood killed an estimated 2 million people. It submerged farmland across multiple provinces. It displaced tens of millions. In 1954, a major flood killed 33,000 people and displaced 18 million. In 1998, another major flood caused $26 billion in damage and killed more than 4,000 people, with hundreds of millions more living under flood threat for months. The Yangtze was not just a river. It was a recurring catastrophe. Something had to control it. The idea of damming the Yangtze at the Three Gorges was first proposed in 1919 by Sun Yat-sen, the founder of modern China. He looked at the Three Gorges, the dramatic section of the Yangtze where the river cuts through a series of spectacular limestone gorges in what is now Hubei province, and he saw potential. Flood control, hydroelectric power, navigation improvement. The dream was taken up again in 1944 when American engineer John Savage surveyed the site for the wartime Chinese government and proposed a detailed dam design. His plan was never executed. Civil war and communist revolution intervened. Mao Zedong, founder of the People's Republic, visited the Three Gorges in 1956 and wrote a poem that included the famous lines about a great dam rising across the gorges. The dream continued, but the project was repeatedly delayed. The Cultural Revolution, economic instability, technical challenges, cost estimates that were staggering even by the standards of a country building at Chinese scale. In 1989, the Chinese government was on the verge of approving the project when a journalist named Dai Qing published a book collecting the warnings of engineers, historians, and scientists, arguing that the project was technically flawed, environmentally destructive, and politically driven rather than rationally justified. The book was banned after the Tiananmen Square crackdown. Dai Qing was imprisoned, and in 1992, the National People's Congress voted to approve the Three Gorges Dam. 1/3 of the delegates, an extraordinary number for a project in China, voted against it or abstained. The opposition was unprecedented. Construction began in 1994. What China set out to build at the Three Gorges was unlike anything previously attempted in dam construction. The numbers are simply staggering. The dam wall is 2,335 meters long, nearly 1.5 miles from one canyon wall to the other. It rises 185 meters above the riverbed, taller than a 60-story skyscraper. To build it required 27.2 million cubic meters of concrete, more concrete than any structure ever built. For comparison, the Hoover Dam used 4.4 million cubic yards. The Three Gorges Dam used 6 times that volume. The power generation system consists of 34 main generating units, 32 main turbine generators, plus 2 plant-use power generating units, each one capable of generating 700 megawatts of electricity. Total installed capacity, 22,500 megawatts. To put that in perspective, 22,500 megawatts is more than the entire electricity generating capacity of most medium-sized countries. It powers the equivalent of 60 million homes. The construction required diverting the Yangtze River, the third longest river in the world, through temporary channels while the dam was built in the dry riverbed. Workers used coffer dams to hold the river back in sections, excavating the foundation down to solid bedrock. At peak construction, over 26,000 workers were employed simultaneously on the dam site. Millions of tons of steel were fabricated and installed. The project consumed a significant portion of China's entire national cement production for years. It was completed in 2006, 2 years ahead of schedule. When the Three Gorges Dam was completed and the gates were closed, the Yangtze River began to back up. Slowly at first, then faster. The water rose 175 meters above its original level. It spread upstream for 600 kilometers, filling the Three Gorges themselves, submerging the spectacular limestone cliffs, covering the ancient temples and towns that had existed along the riverbanks for 1,000 years and more. The reservoir that formed, Lake Three Gorges, contains 39.3 cubic kilometers of water. It covers 1,084 square kilometers of land. Beneath that water today are the remains of 13 cities and county seats, 140 towns, 1,350 villages, 657 factories, 139 power stations, and countless cultural and archaeological sites. Entire streetscapes, entire neighborhoods, entire lifetimes of human settlement. Some of the most spectacular scenery in China, the dramatic gorges that Chinese painters and poets had depicted for centuries, was changed forever. The water level in the gorges rose so high that the cliff faces, once soaring hundreds of meters above the river, now rise only partially above the waterline. Tourists still visit. The gorges are still dramatic. But what they see today is not what existed before the dam. The ancient riverside towns, the stone staircases descending to the river, the traditional fishing communities, all gone. Beneath 175 meters of still water. The statistic is a number so large it is difficult to fully comprehend. 1.4 million people displaced. Not by war, not by earthquake, not by natural disaster, by a government decision, by a dam. The displacement for the Three Gorges Reservoir was the largest forced relocation in the history of dam construction, possibly the largest planned relocation of a civilian population for any single infrastructure project in human history. The process began before construction was complete and continued for years afterward. Families received notices that their homes, their farms, their towns would be submerged. They were assigned to new locations, some within the reservoir region, others relocated to entirely different provinces of China. The government paid compensation. Officials promised new apartments, new farmland, new opportunities. In many cases, the promises were kept imperfectly at best. Farmers who had worked the same land for generations were moved to hillsides with different soil, different conditions, different crops. Factory workers were relocated to cities where their skills didn't match the available jobs. Elderly residents were moved away from the villages where their ancestors had lived for centuries. Independent reporting and research. much of it conducted at great personal risk by Chinese journalists and academics, documented widespread corruption in the compensation process, with officials diverting relocation funds. The full human cost of the displacement was never fully accounted for in any official record. 1.4 million people, each one a life interrupted, a history submerged. The environmental consequences of the Three Gorges Dam are extensive, ongoing, and in some cases irreversible. The Yangtze River dolphin, the baiji, was one of the world's only freshwater dolphins. Scientists had already listed it as critically endangered before dam construction began. The altered hydrology of the dam, combined with decades of river traffic, fishing pressure, and pollution, contributed to its decline. In 2006, a 6-week survey of the entire Yangtze failed to find a single individual. The baiji is now considered functionally extinct, the first large aquatic mammal driven to extinction in over 50 years. The Yangtze finless porpoise, a closely related species, is critically endangered and declining. Chinese sturgeon, a species that has existed since the time of the dinosaurs, once migrated up the Yangtze to spawn. The dam blocked their migration route entirely. Despite artificial breeding programs, wild populations have collapsed. The dam also altered the river's sediment dynamics. The Yangtze historically carried enormous quantities of sediment, sand and silt, from the mountains to the sea. The reservoir traps this sediment. Downstream, the river runs clearer but scours its own bed, undermining riverbanks and affecting ecosystems across thousands of kilometers. The reservoir itself triggered over 3,000 seismic events in its first decade, minor earthquakes caused by the weight of water pressing on geological faults. Some researchers believe the reservoir contributed to the devastating 2008 Sichuan earthquake, though this remains scientifically disputed. The dam created a sacrifice zone. What was sacrificed may not be fully understood for generations. Against all of this cost, the displacement, the ecological damage, the cultural losses, what did China actually achieve? The flood control record is significant. Since the dam became operational, the lower Yangtze has experienced no major catastrophic flooding of the kind that killed thousands in 1931, 1954, and 1998. The dam's massive reservoir provides a buffer, absorbing floodwaters during peak runoff and releasing them gradually. In 2020, the Three Gorges Dam absorbed the largest flood flows in its history and held. The power generation is extraordinary. Since full operation in 2012, the dam has generated between 80 and 100 terawatt-hours of electricity per year, clean, renewable, carbon-free electricity. In 2020, it generated a record 111.8 terawatt-hours, the most ever produced by any power station on Earth in a single year. At China's current energy mix, the dam prevents the emission of approximately 100 million tons of carbon dioxide annually compared to equivalent coal generation. Navigation improvement was a third stated goal. The reservoir submerged the dangerous rapids that made upper Yangtze navigation extremely hazardous. 5-tier ship locks allow vessels to pass through the dam, and the deeper water allows much larger ships to reach Chongqing, 2,400 kilometers upstream, than were previously possible. The dam did what it was designed to do. The question is whether what it cost was worth what it achieved. The Three Gorges Dam is not a completed story. The problems it created continue to evolve. The reservoir's banks are unstable. The weight of 39 billion cubic meters of water pressing against geological formations that were never designed to hold it has triggered thousands of landslides along the reservoir margins. The Chinese government has spent billions reinforcing slopes and relocating additional communities from landslide-prone areas, adding hundreds of thousands more displaced people to the project's human cost. The city of Chongqing, one of China's largest cities, with a metropolitan population of 32 million people, sits at the upper end of the reservoir. Its entire riverfront and portions of its urban area were affected by the rising water. The city has had to continuously adapt its flood management systems to account for the dam's altered hydrology. Downstream, the changed sediment dynamics are affecting the Yangtze Delta, one of China's most economically important and densely populated regions. Shanghai sits on this delta. The reduced sediment load from the river means the delta is no longer building outward, and in some areas is actually eroding. The long-term implications for one of China's most critical coastal regions are still being assessed. Water quality in the reservoir has been a persistent problem. Urban runoff, agricultural chemicals, and the decay of organic material submerged during filling created significant water quality issues in the reservoir's early years. Management has improved, but the reservoir remains a complex environmental system that requires continuous monitoring and intervention. The dam is also aging. Its operational lifespan is estimated at 100 years. The sediment filling its reservoir, slower than feared but ongoing, will eventually reduce its effectiveness. The long-term management of a structure this size is an engineering challenge without historical precedent. The Three Gorges Dam was China's last megadam of its kind. Not because China stopped building dams, quite the opposite. China has continued building large hydroelectric projects at a pace no other country can match. But the Three Gorges experience changed how China approaches large infrastructure projects. The displacement controversies led to reform in Chinese resettlement law. The environmental damage accelerated the creation of stronger environmental review processes. The geological instability issues changed how reservoir projects are sited and managed. The dam's financial model, which was supposed to pay for itself through electricity sales, has been complicated by ongoing costs of managing the reservoir's environmental and stability problems. The full accounting of the Three Gorges Dam's costs and benefits is still being written. Internationally, the Three Gorges became a reference point, a cautionary tale about the true costs of mega-infrastructure that gets cited by engineers, environmentalists, and development economists around the world. When countries in Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia consider large dam projects, the Three Gorges case is always in the room. The displacement, the environmental damage, the geological instability, the cultural losses, and also the flood control, the clean electricity, the navigation improvements. The dam changed China, and it changed how the world thinks about what such projects cost and what they are worth. Stand on top of the Three Gorges Dam today and look upstream. The reservoir stretches away from you, vast and still. You cannot see the end of it. It curves beyond the horizon, following the river valley 600 kilometers into the mountains of central China. Beneath that water are cities, towns, villages, fields that families farmed for 20 generations, temples where people prayed for 1,000 years, staircases that children climbed to fetch water from the river, all of it under 175 meters of water. Turn around. Look downstream. The Yangtze flows on, controlled now, measured, released and managed quantities by engineers in control rooms. The river that killed millions in the 20th century runs quieter now. The flood threat that defined life along its banks for 5,000 years has been reduced. Not eliminated, but significantly reduced. 600 kilometers away, in Shanghai, 24 million people go about their lives partly powered by electricity generated here. Clean electricity, carbon-free electricity. Electricity that does not come from a coal mine or an oil well. The Three Gorges Dam is not a simple story. It is not a story with heroes and villains. It is not a story where the engineering achievement cancels out the human cost, or where the human cost cancels out the achievement. It is a story about what happens when a civilization makes a decision at scale. When the math of millions of lives saved from floods is weighed against the reality of 1.4 million lives displaced. When the clean electricity of the future is built on the cultural memory of the past. The dam stands, the river flows, and beneath the water, the drowned cities wait.